I'm Chance Dorland, and in San Antonio, military means local. This is Military City, a podcast from ExpressNews.com, where each week San Antonio Express News senior reporter Sig Christensen and I discuss the military stories important to San Antonio, both from today and the past. Of course, Sig Christensen was embedded with the 3rd Infantry Division during the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 and has reported on military-related topics for decades. We're talking about one of those topics today. Sig, we're discussing a case that personally, for me, is a bit hard to believe. The man we're going to hear from today served in the Marine Corps for 2 decades and has now been denied a U.S. passport. We'll get to all that, of course, within today's episode. But how did you originally hear about this man's story?
This originally came through an editor. One of the reporters knew about this story, our immigration reporter, Sylvia Foster-Frau. And there was a discussion about who should do the story. I cover veterans, and I'm familiar with the Marines and the military. And Sylvia, it seemed, was pretty preoccupied. She's been a very busy reporter, not only reporting on immigration, which is her new beat, but she also has been doing a lot of work on Sutherland Springs because she has been our lead reporter on that story pretty much from the beginning. So I got involved, talked with him on the phone on a Friday afternoon, and I came back and told my bosses that basically I feel like this is a story. We clearly had a problem that was very similar to the story reported originally by the Washington Post. And the State Department pushed back pretty hard on one of the Post chief allegations that the problem is worse than it has been in years. In fact, their own figures show that the problem was much greater. And when I say the problem, I mean the problem of the State Department denying passports to Hispanics along the border who have been born to midwives. That's kind of the group of people that seem to be targeted here. And so the result is that this man was born to a midwife, and he wasn't really even sure. And when you think about it, none of us really knows where we were born, or we could even not know when if it weren't for somebody telling us. So most of us have the advantage of having been born in a hospital. And so there's lots of documentation there. There are medical records. There are doctors signing off, things like that. Midwives are a bit of a murky business. And so Gunnery Sergeant Martinez has a bit of a problem here because he's been caught up in what one lawyer called a dragnet of the State Department, basically stopping anybody who makes a passport application who had a midwife involved in their birth. And these tend to be people along the border. We don't know exactly how many people have been caught up in this thing, but we are sure it is in the thousands, and that it seems to have affected mainly people from the Texas-Mexico border. And it sometimes affects people who are not from the border. So we talked to a congressman, Lloyd Doggett, who had 3 people in the Austin area, greater Austin area. We talked with an immigration lawyer in Houston who said that 3 police officers, fairly young, 2 Houston police officers and a sheriff's deputy, had been caught up in the same thing. And they were born to midwives and told, well, we want extra documentation. Your birth certificate is not enough to prove you are a citizen. Mind you, and this is Gunnery Sergeant Martinez's problem, his birth certificate, which was good enough to get him into the Marine Corps, is not good enough for him to get a passport. And if you listen to him, he's very angry about that. He feels like he has been targeted because he's Hispanic, and he accuses the State Department of being racist. The State Department argues that a lot of these births are questionable, or at least some of them are. They have found that midwives did indeed forged documents that they were not honest about all of the births that they handled. And so the midwife becomes a big flag for them. And their process and how they come to decide who to require more paperwork from isn't clear to me or anyone else. You talk to immigration lawyers about it, and they only know that the problem seems to be getting worse. They have more clients coming to them saying, hey, I can't get a passport. They say that because I was born to a midwife, I need to provide more documentation. And in a lot of cases, that documentation is almost impossible to come by. We're talking about people who were born decades ago. Some of them are in their 50s and their 60s. And, even if the parents are alive, they may not be in their right minds. In the case of Gunnery Sergeant Martinez, his mother suffers from Alzheimer's. That is actually a common problem. If you're in your 50s, and if I recall correctly, he's 51, your parents are going to be much older, and maybe they're not even alive anymore. And then the other documentation that the State Department wants consists of things like your baptismal records, your school records, things like that, affidavits. But if there's nobody around who can attest to your birth and say your parents have died, you don't even know where some of that documentation would be. One of the things that the State Department would like to see are old bills. Well, how many people have a bill laying around from, say, your rent check from 1945? That's the problem they're running into right there. That paper is simply not either easily found or even in existence. And so it's a real hurdle for some of these people. And the immigration lawyers will tell you that quite frequently they encourage their clients to simply keep looking for paperwork because it's really expensive to go fight this in the courts. And your best bet is to just find the paper you need and submit it and hope that the State Department says that's good enough. It seems that for the most part, something on the order of 90% or so of these extended passport applications get approved. So if you dig around long enough, you might have enough to get your passport.
So obviously that whole process you just described, Sid, could be very frustrating, and that seems to be the case here. Let's hear from Marine Gunnery Sergeant Enrique Martinez talking about, once again, that understandable anger over this issue.
The initial sentiment, which is still lingering, and that's hatred. Hatred to the absolute most. Hatred for an injustice, in a sense, because after considering it day in, day out, for as long as it's been happening, which is now going on in excess of 9 months, 6 months, there is no possible explanation as to the rationale, reasoning, logic for this to be happening to me. So because I can't understand it, there's nothing that tells me, oh, it makes sense. The hatred still lingers because the fact that what resonates in my mind is a simple question is in that, why is it so acceptable for me to go serve my country and risk my life in defense of the country and anybody and all citizens of that country, but it's not okay to get a permission to travel, which in essence that's what a passport really is. Why do I have to go through this interrogation, as it feels, to have to justify me getting a passport? So the hatred is what really resonates within me, because there's absolutely no understanding as to why I'm being put through this. That would make sense. The subtleties of the process and the communication that's being exchanged back and forth, I do feel strongly that there is a sentiment that that's connected to targeting, racist, targeting Hispanics based on last name issue. I believe that's a contributory matter to what the current situation is with the passport, in that the people behind this process are either instructed or they feel that it's legitimate to question the integrity of my birth certificate based on my last name, which again they associate it with being of Hispanic Hispanic background. So absolutely, I totally agree. I totally feel like that every day, that it is a targeted approach based on my Hispanic background.
So, as I mentioned at the top of the discussion today, Sig, this is really shocking to me. I understand everything that you've pointed out so far. There are documented cases where people in similar circumstances have forged documents, to use that term again. And so there is a reason why there would be some scrutiny here. But once again, Marine Gunnery Sergeant Enrique Martinez, 20 years of experience in the Marine Corps. So this seems like a special circumstance where maybe it wouldn't be viewed the same way as some of these other cases. But that doesn't seem to be the case. His passport application was denied, I believe, within the last year. You spoke to him, and I'd love for you to talk about this before we hear the clip about how that experience in the Marine Corps really shaped his life, and I think probably drives a lot of the passion that he has to make sure that he does get his passport.
Well, when you listen to him talk about how the Corps shaped his life, and we talked about this, this experience is profound in his life. He came from the lower Rio Grande Valley. He came from the border, Brownsville, and that's 51 years ago when he's born. I can tell you from having grown up down there, that was a place where Hispanics were definitely treated as second-class citizens for a long time. And even in those days, there was a lot of racial discrimination. It's unfortunate, but the history of that goes back a long way. And there's no point in getting too deeply into it, other than to say it did, and even in, I think in some cases, still does exist. And so he goes into the Corps, and what he discovers is that the Corps doesn't care. They don't care if he's Hispanic. They don't care if you're black. They don't care if you're American Indian, Hawaiian, or white. They treat you the same way, probably like garbage when you're first a recruit, because they just treat you badly when you're in basic training. They break you down. They remake you. They turn you into what they believe they need you to be. Somebody who follows an order without question. Somebody who is competent and does what he is taught and puts it into practice. Because in battle, everything hinges on your training. And what's always impressive to see in battle, by the way, is people who are well trained. They do things not even thinking about it, and they do it the way they were trained. So it's really important. And he loved the Corps because it embraced the diversity of the people who came there. It protected the minorities who served in it. And in his 20 years, he never really worried about being treated differently. Now he feels like he's being treated very differently by a different standard, and he feels like it's happening because he is Hispanic. He has a Hispanic last name, Martinez, and he's been born to a midwife. And those two things, he believes, have made him a target of the State Department. He doesn't have any doubt about it. When you listen to what he says, he's very angry. And I can't tell you whether the State Department is racist, as he claims, or not. I have no idea. I only know that they are correct in saying that this problem with birth certificates does exist. It goes all the way back to the 1950s. And The agency says that this is a citizen fraud challenge, and I'm reading a statement dating back to the administrations of Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. The U.S. Department of State Bureau of Consular Affairs continues to issue passports to applicants based on their applications and evidence following policies on these types of cases that have been in place since 2009. Now, that's true. This actually goes back to Barack Obama, and by sheer percentages, 1 in every 3 passports was challenged or denied in 2015. That was when Obama was president. It's now 1 in every 4. So the situation, by at least the State Department's numbers, has gotten better, not worse. But the immigration lawyers I've talked to down in Brownsville, Houston, and Colorado, as well as Alaska, there's one up there, they all say that they're hearing more and more about these denial cases. And their clients, or people who might be their clients, are completely frazzled because they really do not know what to do. And it's very hard for them to find the paper that they need to basically convince the State Department that they are who they claim to be, American citizens. And so there we are. That's the problem. This situation is not new. What is new is that we have suddenly become aware of it, and the Washington Post and the Express News are out there reporting on it. And we've actually found real people who have been targeted, or at least been found to have not provided the kind of documentation the State Department says it has to have to issue a passport. Ultimately, this comes down to something that's really important to Gunnery Sergeant Martinez. He feels like it's not just a denial of a passport, this document that allows you to travel, and it allows all Americans to travel. He feels like it is also a denial of his basic rights of citizenship. He feels like he is being treated as if he is not a citizen.
Life in the Marines, it opened up not only so many doors of opportunity for me, it created a bridge to maturity and to growth from a young man to a responsible man, a responsible American as well. The Marine Corps, in essence, opened my eyes and taught me how to become a responsible American from day one. From day one in boot camp, when I stepped on those yellow footprints, to the day I retired, it made me who I am, the essence of a patriotic American, willing to sacrifice everything for the sake of the country because of the greatness of this country. And in essence, through the Marine Corps, I saw that this country gives so much to its citizen, and that's how I feel. I basically was given opportunity to live my dream and live the American dream through the Marine Corps.
And how did that impact the way you viewed your country?
It completely opened my eyes to the beauty and the greatness of this country, day in, day out, serving my country, serving as a Marine. It was an honor and privilege to serve in the Marine Corps and to be a Marine, to be allowed to have the privilege of being called a Marine, and in essence, to reflect the greatness and the power of this country, in that there's no country greater and better than this country because of what it has to offer, and it has so much to offer. I've been blessed. In essence, it's a blessing to be a Marine, in essence, to be an American.
But you found it in the discipline of the Corps. You found it in taking orders. You found it in being yelled at. You found it in being tested. You found it in being deployed. Was it the Marines itself, just the identity of being a Marine, that kind of opened your eyes to the country you were serving? And was that the first time you really had a view of the United States that maybe you didn't have as when you were younger, when you were in school growing up?
That was part of it, the identity of being a Marine. But the other part is having a purpose in life, having a purpose in defending the country, defending its principles, its morals, its virtues, its identity as a country. That I was on the front lines of the representing to the rest of the world what this country was and continued to be. And so everything that I was assigned to do, everything that I was told to do, I didn't take it not just as a Marine, but also as a patriotic American, willing to do what I needed to do and sacrifice in order to protect the country, protect the people of this country. So it was a twofold element, twofold impact in that. One, yes, that's the responsibility and the commitment of a Marine. And two is also the commitment of a patriotic American that just happens to be a Marine.
And finally, of course, SIG Marine Gunnery Sergeant Enrique Martinez, who's the person we've been talking about on today's episode of the Military City podcast, really does seem to be completely invested in fighting for his U.S. passport. And he does not sound like he's going to stop fighting for it anytime soon, even if he might think he might not win this battle.
He's a Marine, and he has now decided that this is a battle that a Marine has to take and win. So no, he isn't going to quit. And at first it was an issue of his citizenship, and now it's an issue of his pride, and it's also an issue of basically trying to defend not only himself but others out there who were told that their birth certificates were not enough to prove they're American citizens. And that's the battle that he has joined in now. And no, I don't think he's going to quit. And I don't think he will be the only one who fights like hell over this, because he won't be the last veteran affected by this policy. So we'll see. It'll be very interesting to see how quickly this is resolved. Sometimes when a story gets into the paper, things happen quickly. I'm sure he was hoping that's the case for him.
Right now, my main priority is to collaborate with the assistance of the Congressman's office to provide whatever information or evidence I can collect, submit it for consideration, and see what happens from that point on.
Do you think that what you're doing between your collaboration and Congressman Castro, you think that is going to resolve the problem, that you will end up getting your passport? Are you optimistic about that, or are you not optimistic about it?
I'm not optimistic. I'm just doing the right thing and following the advice and recommendations of the people assisting me. I mean, they're willing to step out and help me out, and I appreciate greatly all their assistance that they're trying to provide to me. But the damage has already been done. The perception and the results that I have since seen from the Department of State leads me to believe that there might not be a passport ever, based on, again, the treatment that I've received. However, I'm not going to give up, and I'm not giving up now, but I will do whatever I can, exhaust every measure possible to try to get that. But at the meantime, I don't see it happening.
You don't have any faith in the Department of State to do this. That's what you're saying.
None. I have none.
What leads you to think that?
Because I'm just, one, a number. Two, a number of Hispanic background based on last name and whatever perception they have of me. And based on the treatment that I've received from the Department of State, I have 100% believe that they're not willing to see who I really am, an American citizen, and give me what's rightfully mine. I really don't see that. I don't see that the Department of State recognizing me for that.
Do you worry that making this such a battle puts you at risk of having further scrutiny from Customs and Border Patrol, Homeland Security, ICE? Does that cross your mind? Your wife talked about that. She's a little worried about it.
Of course, absolutely. I think about it every day. I think about the possible repercussions. But if I do think about repercussions and I fear the repercussions, then I'm not clinging on to the true identity of who I am as a Marine. A Marine has no fear. A true Marine does not fear the repercussions of the right actions. And so therefore, whatever happens, happens. I will deal with it at that time. I truly believe that the Department of State has malicious intent or bad intent to not give it to me. I don't trust the Department of State. But with all that being said, I was a Marine for 20 years. If I don't stand up, don't have the courage to stand up, not just for myself, but for other innocent victims from other Department of State, then who will? So I have responsibility based on who I am as an identity as a Marine and a patriotic American to do what's right, and that is to stand up for what's right.